Originally from San Francisco, grew up there and went to school in the Bay Area, Berkeley. Right now I'm in Puerto Rico though, so it's a nice tropical weather here. Yeah, I just got into crypto after being in financial services for about 10 years, doing financial consulting advisory, investment research, things like that. And was frustrated with everything happening in the economy. We had the great financial crisis in 2008 and 9. And I always thought that the economy quite wasn't, a lot of it was artificial. It just wasn't working. I think in an honest way. Was frustrated, was more of a gold bug, learned a lot about Austrian economics, and just was looking for alternatives. And at that point, it was gold. Someone mentioned Bitcoin, and I wasn't a believer in Bitcoin until I read Eric Voorhees' blog. It was geared towards libertarians. And he made some very powerful points. He said, hey, this is, because I was hesitant about the intangible nature of Bitcoin. It was a little bit uncertain and vague to me about like where it got its value. But then his blog really made it clear. As long as an asset is scarce and useful, it's going to have some value. We just don't know what the value is going to be. And then that clicked in my mind. I was like, wait a minute, I really have to reconsider this Bitcoin thing, because he makes a lot of sense. It doesn't have to be like the most valuable asset in the world. It just has to have some value. And then as people recognize it, it could gain more and more value and adoption. So this was back in about mid 2012, I started following, going to the meetup groups and seeing a lot of the early founders of businesses like Coinbase, Kraken, and so many other projects. Just being a fly in the wall, just going to the meetups every month, just learning about Bitcoin and knowing that this was the future eventually. So really focused on building businesses. I wish I invested earlier, but I didn't really have a lot of funds back then to invest, and it was actually pretty hard to even get Bitcoin back then. But I was following it as a technology, going to the meetup groups. I went and followed different ecosystems from Bitcoin. The early meetups, there were people building Ripple back then. This was late 2012, 2013. So Ripple, and then Stellar, and then BitShares, which is what I gravitated towards, because they had a stablecoin system that didn't have a counterparty. And I thought that was incredibly important. I knew stablecoins were a way to get mainstream, but more like Tether and Stellar and Ripple would rely on the traditional infrastructure. But a collateralized stablecoin like what BitShares was creating was ideal because it didn't have a counterparty. I went to BitShares, and then I followed down to Steem, Hive, EOS. And that's where I have a startup right now. We have an EOS wallet on-ramp application. It's called 100x Trade. Out of college, I was more into telecommunications. I'm older. I was there during the dot-com boom. And so I was working at AT&T. It was Pacific Bell before that, SBC, and then back to AT&T. But I was in telecommunications. That was my first job. So it was in technology. It was more learning on the job, and all the phone cable plants that all the wires and cables you see on telephone poles, and connecting houses with internet or phone services, kind of what I helped with more on the engineering side of that. But that was during the dot-com boom. So I experienced this mania, I guess, in technology, this shift. I remember even in college, it's just like we had the computer science labs with full-on video. This was in the mid 90s, right? And you'd see video streaming in a computer lab, and it just to think back at that moment, it wasn't a standard thing that we have all right now. It's just, wow, that's amazing. You could see full-on video like on a computer. Like, how does that work, right? So I wish I gravitated even more towards that, because that was very unique and unusual, I think. And it took a long time. Netscape started becoming popular, and it took this many years before what we see today, the modern web, social media, the infrastructure for YouTube and video to be successful. So it took a decade after that to come out there. Anyway, so I had moved from this kind of .com engineering era into more business, because I realized in working in the corporate world that you really didn't have a say until you got into management. There's this, the technical aspect wasn't the main factor in getting raises or making a difference in a big company. So I realized business was important. I lost a lot of money during the .com crash. And then I learned, hey, I have to learn more about economics and investing, because what happened. I kind of knew that this was a lot of this mania was artificial and inflated, but I have to really learn about how the economy works. So that's where I went to business school in Southern California for a couple of years, and then went into financial services, financial planning, investment research, and I did that kind of for a decade before getting into crypto. And that was more financial planning, financial advisory. I was working with firms to help clients with money management, estate planning, taxes, insurance, all those kinds of things. So more personal financial planning. A lot to do with investment research and portfolio management and allocations, and just advice around that. A little bit company research, but not a lot. And yeah, but I started getting into alternative ideas around the economy. Ron Paul, I helped kind of on the political side, Ron Paul and his campaigns in 2008 and 12. And he was the one person talking about how the economy is broken, where we have too much debt. The Federal Reserve is, creating a debt-based money system, and they're creating money out of thin air. The government's assisting that as well, right? Just creating debt where the Federal Reserve purchases and then creates this money artificially to prop up the economy. And so I already knew there were fundamental issues with the economy. And then 2008, I sort of expected. I mean, even in 2007, before that, I was like, this is unsustainable. We're eventually going to get into rough financial situations. I was a little bit too bearish. I was a perma bear probably back then, but I do understand things take time, things take decades, and even if it's artificial, it can last for a very long, for decades. And we're getting closer and closer to, I think, a more significant financial collapse, really. And so I think this technology is here at the right place at the right time. So even being into the alternative economic circles, Austrian economists, I've learned about all the other economic theories, Keynesian economics, supply side economics, all these different theories, but ultimately the Austrian theories that I learned from the internet more resonated with me a lot more. And so I progressed and eventually got from the Austrian school of economics to this more a similar kind of economics, but now just this modern form that relies on technology to be the base layer or infrastructure for a new world. And that's why it's so exciting every day to be that. I understand it takes time, it takes years, just being in the .com boom. In crypto, you had like 3 booms and busts. And so, maybe, we'll see another, we'll come out of it again. I'm confident of that, but, it may take some time. But how long do we, like 5-10 years, probably? I think that's probably the time frame I see a lot of major changes happening. So I'm excited just to be there to help, to provide solutions that mainstream people can use. And so we'll see yeah, we'll see exactly what happens in the next 5-10 years. I think just so many big changes are happening. Like just the last few years with COVID lockdowns and things like that. I mean, I think that's really changed the nature of how people think about work, think about technology, think about their lives. And so I think that gives an opportunity for new solutions that that I'm excited about.